here. GTV is here.
Oh, GTV, I doubt them. Thank you, GTV. We're calling the meeting of the Open Space Ordinance Rewrite Subcommittee to order. So I did, and I was very late in sending them out. I sent out draft minutes just this evening at 5 p.m. and I had printer issues, so the version that I brought printed for folks is microscopic at best. So unless anyone really wants to take action on minutes, we can hold off on that, and I'll just have these posted as draft. I just sent them at 5 p.m. today.
If people don't want to do it, that's fine.
So I want to jump back into, I guess, where we left off at our last meeting. We had reviewed the ordinance and the development regulation drafts separately. Some of the input that I received, and I have not had a chance to make major edits yet, but on the ordinance, one discussion item that we had talked about, and I think then left and did not come to a conclusion on, was the parent lot, and if we were going to be allowing or requiring, so the mandatory use of open space or allowing open space on lots based on a lot that's currently 10 acres or larger, or 20 acres or larger for mandatory, or if we wanted to keep the parent lot reference that's in our existing ordinance. And I don't know if anyone has basically the parent lot reference would mean that a lot that was in existence in 2003 when the ordinance was first adopted, it would need to be a lot that was of record at that time. I don't know that there's a benefit to keeping that reference in there. So we talked about that and then sort of kicked that to be something to further discuss, but that's the only item left on the ordinance itself that I think was still a conversation piece. So I didn't know if anyone had a chance to review or think about that or have strong opinions.
Just to quickly summarize what would be the pros and cons of whether it's kept or not.
In my mind, the cons are more of just the tracking on which lots were lots of record as of 2003. And I don't know what the benefit is of keeping that parent lot reference. I think that it's a little bit easier to administer if we eliminate that, but there was a reason for it being in there in the first place. So I don't know if our committee member with more longevity or history on the drafting of that particular ordinance, Jim, I don't know if you have any recollection or strong thoughts on that.
The reason that was created was so you couldn't make it difficult to avoid open space by sequentially subdividing lots that were carved out. Because the rule was there's certain exceptions, but otherwise you have to have open space. And if you don't relate everything back to a parent lot, you can just get somebody avoiding the open space by a series of sequential subdivisions.
Okay.
So we thought, and I guess I beg to differ that it's that hard to track. That's
Yeah.
why we have a planning staff. That's
Yep.
their job. Make them do it.
I don't particularly have an issue with it, but I think the application should identify the date of creation of the parent lot.
Yes. Yes.
Because I don't know that we have really discussed that in any open space applications. And I think there's no issue with requiring the applicant to do that. They're dealing with the lot.
Yeah, it's not that hard to do.
Okay.
Look at the registry of deeds.
Yeah. With that explanation, I can understand. I guess I haven't seen that there's anyone actively trying to avoid open space
Yeah, but
development.
how would you really know at this point?
Yeah, how would we know? You're right.
A subdivision request comes in, we don't know what we're gonna do with it. They subdivide, we approve, we don't have any jurisdiction to not approve it.
Well, I think it makes sense to have it based on the explanation of it. And I know that question often comes up when we look at something and it's like, well, what's gonna happen to this one big lot you wanna, you know? Would certainly make a lot of people feel more comfortable.
Bruce, do you agree with the consensus seems to be keeping the parent lot reference in order to,
After the explanation, yes, I had a little
Okay.
confusion with, well, maybe it'd be simpler not to address that, but I always have a concern of that subsequential subdivision, just, okay, we'll do the 10 acre, then another 5 acre later, you
Yep.
know, 5 years down the road, and it's like,
Well, it's not 5 years, it's 6 months down the road.
yeah,
right,
Yeah.
well, sometimes, yeah,
2 months down the road.
and it's not difficult to find, and it's not that hard to really track. I mean, yeah, it's a little extra step
yep.
in the application, you
And-
have to dig up the deed or
And
go
this
to the
road
registry and
is-
find out the
Right.
creation of that lot. But it's a good explanation, I was curious why. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, why a reference?
It's good to have the institutional
Yes.
knowledge,
But it would be useful to note, and we tend not to in our ordinance, of what those dates are, parent lot as of when. And some towns, maybe we do, and I just don't know, they have a chart at the back on the date or the front, the date of enactment of different provisions, but we seem not to have that. So somebody's gonna say, well, when was this created? So when we do ordinances, we ought to insert that somewhere.
yeah, there really should be that table
It should
of,
be, yeah, most, I would
changes
say most
and-
towns
and-
do. I can't say most, but many do.
But, yeah.
It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it gets lost. 'Cause
Yeah.
I don't remember what we did last week. Played my dog, went to work. It's just life.
the date was written in that, so we'll go back to that, it was March of 2003, we'll go back to that original and include that, but it would be, and I don't know that after the fact, maybe a future task for our planning staff when they have time on their hands would be trying to go through and be documenting those historical changes in the zoning ordinance, but, or at least starting going forward, what changes are adopted each March, just so we have it tracking. Then the regulations that we had started to get into, and I heard the feedback loud and clear that the open space standards are way overly complicated, we need to simplify that, so I'm working on that. Barbara, I think you had started, and I saw, and I don't know if the yield, the feasibility and yield plan, if you had started to work on some potential language, and if you wanted to,
Well, I don't know that I started to work on potential language, but I wasn't hearing huge, people were at least considering this discussion. So what I did is I've talked to a couple of engineers because
I'm sorry.
because the reality is, I don't really know what is going into the development of the plan. I know what we suspect, but I don't have any idea what discussions or what's going on. So I talked to a couple of them, and a few other people. Interestingly enough, Pembroke, I think it's Pembroke, has gotten rid of its open space ordinance because they felt the developments coming in were not consistent with what they wanted, and you now can do it by variance.
Do an open space by variance?
Yeah, that you can, or a conditional use, whatever the permitting process is, depending on how the regs are, because they were not, the regulation was just bringing in stuff that they were not happy with, and now they're considering applications that actually are what they were hoping to get for open space development. So, and that was something that I had seen in some others, that it was sort of an optional thing, and whether you wanted that criteria. But I think the committee as a whole, I'm reading it pretty clearly, they want to keep the open space, they want to keep it mandatory. So I just thought I'd say that because it's
Which
clear.
community did you say it
Pembroke.
was?
because it's clear that the quality of the developments that are proposed on open space are probably not uniform from community to community. So I took what I passed out last week, and I sort of went through it, and we had talked about a special permit or that kind of thing. And I'm not sure if we had a permit, if it wasn't mandatory, what the criteria for the planning board would be to say you need to do open space. You know, so if somebody came in, so I'm not sure that that path, this special permit, is one that we can go down as I sort of looked at it. I think the special permit was in communities where it was not as part of the regs, so you could come in and do it. The landscape architect was something that I had seen, and I'm not sure that all of those steps really add anything to the process if we're worried about design and yield plans. And I think that maybe a conceptual can deal with things as to what you might think are an issue, and should a conceptual, I just thought, well, should a conceptual be mandatory for open space development in order to see if the planning board likes where the developer is going as far as what they're keeping in the developed area and what they're keeping out. I do know there's an application that has come in that went to TRC, I guess, and TRC we basically did not get the application because preliminary review, and I forget whether it was TRC or staff, basically said this does not fly at all as an open space development. So it happens somehow, so I think I need to get a little more clarification on that, and I just haven't had a chance. I did send these to Scott Ozot, to our town engineer, who took a look at it and made some comments. Like, we don't require landscape plans with standard subdivisions currently. You know, I don't really, maybe, and he was thinking more of landscaping as compared to the architecture piece of landscaping. As to what we just talked about, the special permit, he pointed out if we go that route, we need to have clear criteria, and how would you develop that? And one concept in the paperwork I passed out last time was that you couldn't really deviate from the conceptual, and he said, you know, based on experience, there are often a lot of changes from conceptual, so that doesn't seem. He felt that requiring an engineered yield plan seemed reasonable when certain criteria were met, but he wasn't sure how they would prove it was feasible if, you know, like, would you require a house cost and profit margin? And he had some questions about how we pick the engineer. And he thought that some requirements, like the open space development has more than 15 lots. And actually, if you go to the handout that I had tonight, in talking to some of the engineers, it seemed like maybe 20 was a more reasonable number, because at that point you're talking a pretty, you know, you want it to be, if you're going to require this, it needs to be a pretty big plan. The street length, I had some positive feedback on. I would need to talk to Scott about the actual trigger, or if it's a reasonable one. And then I talked about steep slopes and wetlands, and maybe the way to deal with wetlands is to just not allow lots with wetlands. We've had, if you're going to go for an open space development, and preservation of wetlands is one of the criteria, though we know you could get a certain amount of permits for crossings and that kind of thing, why would we allow a house in it? And I didn't have a chance to look this up, Jim, I'm sure you can remind me. When we put a buildable area on a lot, what is the required size of the buildable area? Of course, I put you on the spot with that question, and I didn't bring all my paperwork.
It's like 80 by 40 or
It's not very
something?
big.
There was also a suggestion that on any proposed lots, or end in the yield plan, that they need to identify a buildable area of 100 by 100.
Yeah, and the theory we talked about, the we being, when I was on the board, it's house, garage, even if one's not in the plan, because there will be eventually, and yard area,
Yeah.
because we know those, that's how it's gonna happen.
Now, in that context, I think we're talking about the yield plan, because what we talked about is because we've allowed the frontage to drop down in the open space. Currently, it says 50. I think as a group, we've talked about it really needs to be 100. 50 is way too small.
Yeah.
So I think a buildable area in the lots on the yield plan of 100 by 100 makes sense to show that it's a feasible development, because you're not requiring them to do a test pit on every lot or anything, so requiring them to show 100 by 100 foot area that's buildable, I think is probably a reasonable requirement.
80 by 100 is our regular rectangular area, that minimum buildable area they need to show. But it's as small as 60 by 70 in R1, R2.
But we're not concerned with that if we're not in open space.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
So,
but it's
pretty
small.
small, yeah.
The other thing that was suggested was, you really don't want, you want to try to avoid having to do fully engineered drawings, and I agree. So what is the onus you can put on the applicant for what they're asking, for them to show you that the yield plan is feasible and something that might be done? And this, I thought this, that roads or driveways on the yield plan can't have cuts of fill of 10% or more. Because at that point, you're talking maintenance issues, easement issues, a huge amount of dirt and expense moving around, and the likelihood of those kind of things happening are low.
If-
I mean, in today's environment, it's been pointed out, people are building on things that 10 years ago we would have never thought anybody would build on, but it still has to be pretty
This is for
pricey.
purposes of the yield plan.
Yeah.
When they actually go and build it, the open
Right.
space, they do it all well. But I think that's fair, and I would use a sort of objective number and a subjective factor for us to consider, or not other, I think of the word, extreme development, so we can say, even though technically you meet the 10%, this just doesn't fly. You gotta give yourself some discretion in
Right.
applying a higher standard if you want.
And then another comment was about test pits and what are you requiring them to do, and I'm not really sure where to go with that, because I don't have enough of an engineering background to know where you want to put the test pits and what area it would cover, because if you have a pretty sprawl, I know the yield plans, they say they've done test pits, but I don't know from an engineering standpoint what test pits are of value in determining the viability of a development. Like, how do you decide where you're doing a test pit in a development?
I don't think it would matter as much, because what happens if the test pit says, well, you can't put septic system here, well, then they bring in fill and build it up and put the septic system in. I mean, if you don't have a viable test pit, that means you're gonna alter the terrain to make it viable. It doesn't mean it's gonna eliminate it. I mean, a lot of houses in Goffstown wouldn't be built if that were the case.
Well, I understand that, so that's why I didn't definitely say anything, but it does seem if you can't do a test pit without doing some sort of major dirt move or dig,
Yeah,
what are we talking about here from a yield plan perspective?
from a yield plan perspective, I don't see why requiring a test pit is important.
Well, if you've got 28, since 20 acres is the minimum, if you've got 20 acres of ledge, we don't have water and sewer coming to any.
Oh, no, I understand. The ledge is not an obstacle for the water, you just drill right through it. That it's really the sewer,
Right.
and in that case, they just build it up with fill. I mean, you can drive around and once you know what you're looking for, look at people's yards and see how many of them have these big flat plateaus in front. That's because you couldn't support this test pit, and you had to bring in fill.
Is that a sufficient enough additional cost for us to say a lot is not feasible? That's really the question.
My guess
Yeah,
is that there's a point in the engineering process, and this is where I'd need to talk to Scott, that it's just not viable.
So an option is that the board can require them, but don't compel them. And I don't like to give too much discretion to the board, because it kind of puts the board in a crunch.
Well, I don't, but I think, the reason this sort of got my curiosity going was because I think the last application did some test pits I know they did for the proposed development, but for some reason I remember that there was a test pit done in an area on the yield
Yeah,
plan.
I think they had done some tests, I mean, certainly not for every lot.
No, not.
But they had done.
Aren't they gonna
you know,
have
we're
to do it
talking-
anyway?
Yeah.
So, for the regular subdivision, so why is it a burden to have them shown on the conceptual as well? And then the question is, well, where, how many, every
Well, and I
lot?
think that's what I'm getting to. I think I need to talk to Scott about it, and Scott was not interested in talking to me until after planning board meeting this week.
If by the last one you mean Acorn Drive, there were many test pits, because, you know, site walked it, and there's quite a few.
Were
But
they on the drive as being built, or
The
were
drive
there
is, the
some?
drive is being proposed to build, not scattered throughout the entire property.
Not the
And
For
they
some
would-
reason, I remember a test put like down where they were doing a lot of fill, but maybe I'm,
And they would do that for their own benefit, just to
Right.
have,
Yeah.
just to know how much this is gonna cost.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, that gets done in the course of a normal development. I just thought from a yield plan perspective, is there something, if we know that slopes become an issue, particularly in roads and driveways for the town for maintenance and driveway easements and that kind of thing, you know, that seems like a legitimate thing to be a trigger that, no, we're not gonna allow that lot in your yield plan, or you just can't have them in, I mean, I think we could just say you can't have it in your yield plan.
yeah, I think slopes definitely,
Okay.
that's important, because there's no getting around that.
Right, it's clear, you've
But-
gotta design it. So I think, unfortunately, I didn't get to the conclusion I wanted to since the next meeting, but that's where
I would favor test pits on the proposal on the yield,
But-
only because we're allowing them smaller lots.
But test
Yeah.
pits where? On what lots? On all the conceptual lots?
Yeah, so test pits to prove the density based on
Will work out.
the conventional but then also test pits on
The proposed layout.
proposed actual, what they're.
the proposed
That's
actual
right.
final layout.
Yes.
The open space layout,
Yes,
not the
Yeah.
Yeah, the
traditional.
open
Right.
space layout, definitely.
yeah.
But isn't that a requirement
Yeah,
anyway?
that would be a requirement anyways.
That's-
Oh, that's true,
But-
for the septic.
But
I think it just further proves
I
that,
don't think
okay,
they do.
we're good on slopes, we're good on wetland on this proposed final
Well,
open
to
space
separate,
lot.
what are you requiring on the conceptual plan? And I question whether you're gonna require.
When you say conceptual, the yield plan.
Yield plan, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Yield.
I question whether you're gonna require a test pit for each theoretical lot on the yield
No.
plan. I just, see,
Yeah.
we're gonna be tarred and feathered.
I agree, but if, depending on the yield plan layout or density, I don't know whether there's an objective standard at which it becomes, from an engineering standpoint, something that you would do a test pit on before you came to a planning board with the plan and did the rest of the
Yeah.
engineering.
That sounds like a Scott question.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with it. It's not
Okay.
for every lot, it's is there a criteria when you're doing a development that you do some test pits?
something that it's.
To give
that
you
they-
some-
They do enough to demonstrate that the soils are sufficient, that they're gonna be able to, you know, actually create that number of lots, have the septics to support that.
The
So-
state soil data,
Yeah.
there was something to do with rely on state soil data for the pits and the lots, and I need to figure out what that was in a couple of conversations that when doing applications, that's what they rely on when they're determining.
There's certainly abundant and readily available soil survey data, but it needs to be translated into a form that people can actually understand. You know, every time you see a soil map, lots of nice pretty colors, and this is a blah blah blah, and they have all the descriptive names, but they really need to be categorized to a more functional state, where you could say, you know, these soil types would be good for draining a septic, these would not. And yeah, actually I've been looking at that
Oh, yeah?
as part of the rewriting the natural resource inventory.
Oh, okay.
Looking at stuff like that and going, oh, everybody just makes a nice map, but these maps need to be explained. There needs to be a little bit more drilling down and saying, what does this actually mean?
Right.
Translate into.
Okay. Well, I mean, I will continue down this path and try to write up. I've gotten, you know, thrown some stuff off that I don't think will fly or don't make any sense, but I think that maybe getting criteria into the yield plan, if we confirm that up, that might make more sense than having it kick back to say, okay, now you need to do a feasibility study. And maybe there is a street length that, you know, Scott was sort of torn. He thought, and one engineer thought the street length was a good criteria if you were going to require the applicant to do more. But Scott's like, well, do you want open space or not open space? I want less roads from a highway department standpoint, so if they make it smaller, now you don't want them to do it, that's part of the point.
Explain that one to me. I'm
So if somebody comes in with, and this would be obviously a pretty large lot if we're talking road lengths of this. If somebody comes in and they have a bunch of little, you know, 1,200 feet cul-de-sacs to get all their lots in within the boundary, right? Because they're not going through or connecting, so they do it by all these cul-de-sacs. That's a lot of pavement, right, when you start doing cul-de-sacs to get to all your lots. So if you're doing this on a yield plan where I think the engineering of feasibility is probably pretty low, they're just putting it on paper and saying, yeah, I could do it. If you have to do that many, if you have to create that much roadway to get all your lots, and then you're actually gonna only develop this much roadway to put all your lots in, that sort of tells me that the land has got some characteristics that might make it unlikely that you would do a traditional development.
So you have your number 2 in your list, the street length of proposed open space is less than 50% or some percent of the street length of the yield plan. What does that mean?
Well, it means the yield plan has 100 lots and the road length is 3 miles. The open space development street length for 100 lots is going to be 1 mile. That's a huge difference in layout over the land, and does that mean anything from a layout standpoint and land development standpoint?
But is this standard used for evaluating the yield plan or for the final design of the open space?
Final design.
Ah, okay.
So, like we said, because from that standpoint, it was like what would trigger further review. And it would tell people, if you had some final design things that you could not do, it would tell people when they do the yield plan and then develop their development plan, okay, yield plan, I can't have any slopes more than 10%. So I can't get to this lot, or I can't go here, I can't build this road. When I put it into the actual plan, now I'm cramming all my houses onto a mile instead of 3 miles. I need to make my road 1.5 miles. I mean, that's basically what I'm saying, is it's just a different criteria, and I know. And I'm saying, you have to look at it from a final plan, I think to administer it, it's something for the final plan, but I'm looking at it because I'm saying all these little cul-de-sacs would never be, I'm just using that as an example,
guess-
because traditionally, we would not have approved a plan, we would not approve a plan like that, because they'd want a through street, and they'd want something to a corner that would be able to be built.
Well, that's why I asked, is this standard for the yield plan or the final?
I
design?
know, it's,
But I
So,
think you're gonna be driven by frontage,
right,
the lots.
right,
But
if
so
we
you
increase the
basically-
frontage.
But you can create frontage by having a lot of squiggly little roads. And we're gonna say, that's not feasible, because nobody's gonna build that many roads for those additional, on the yield plan, those additional lots. Right?
Right, that's essentially, so how do you avoid the feasibility analysis, because what is that? And so why don't you have a criteria that says, and I can't get the math to work, I'm not quite sure. But that was just another thing that got discussed in the discussions, and I'm not sure that we can make it as clean as the slope argument,
Yeah, I think it's a noble goal, but kind of tricky.
I know.
Well-
Especially when you don't know anything about building roads or,
Yeah.
Well, or use a situation where the final result is a very short straight road, which
yeah,
is much, much less, much
impacts
shorter,
them.
but that may only because they did a really good job in that plan. I mean,
Yeah.
and I guess I'm a little confused on, like, logistically, what they're preparing for the engineered yield plan then and when, because they won't know what the roadway length is until they've got their final plan, but they can't get their final plan with their lot density numbers without the yield plan.
Yeah, they've got
being-
it, they're doing that stuff anyways, they're not coming
Yeah.
in with a yield plan without having a plan.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we see them all the time, we want you to look at our yield plan to let us know if it's okay. They're not doing a yield plan and not having an end goal.
but isn't this saying that the engineered yield plan is only required when,
Well, I'm
Those
not sure
conditions,
we
yeah.
can get to an engineered yield plan, that's
Okay.
what I'm saying, is
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think that maybe what we
Okay.
need to do is have definitive criteria on the yield plan that they know they have to meet.
okay,
And then we avoid the whole hullabaloo about third parties and analysis and that. And at the same time, if there is a yield plan to final plan comparison that has some validity in regards to what the ultimate density of the open space development is, what would it be? And it's the trade-off between the preservation of the open space and creating these lots that are really not consistent with the character of the neighborhoods that they abut. You know, one can argue that if you've got a lot that can have 40 houses, but you're not doing the 40 lot development and you only do 20, your landowner might get less money, but you can still develop the property. You're just not gonna spend as much or make as much money. And is that really our problem? No.
No, well, that's why we have for example, a 5-acre exception. I mean, your criteria that could apply.
Right,
Or, change the exception, 3 acres or something.
right.
So they have.
Or the number of lots, right? If you've only got,
No.
if you're over 20 acres and you've only got, what do we have? So many lots, we could have an exception, right?
So you expand the exceptions without weakening too much the concept of still promoting.
Right. So, and that's sort of number 5 on last week's thing where I say, you know, I had proposed that the frontage of the lots be no less than 50, you know. But if we're changing it to 100 foot, the open space lots have to be at least 100 feet. What's the ag frontage?
It's 200,
Isn't it?
standard zoning, yeah, it's 200.
It's 200, and conservancy
Conservation is 300, ag's 200.
300. We sort of take care of that discrepancy by, if we say it can't be less than 100 feet frontage.
Right.
Then it's not what the rest of the neighborhood is.
The new neighborhood.
Think about our goals. It's, and you keep saying this, we don't want the look of the open space development to be incompatible with
Future-
other developments if we can avoid it.
Right.
And on the other hand, you're saying, well, so what? You're still preserving open space, which is the goal, so you make it a denser neighborhood. Is that bad?
That's what I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, I know, so looking at the two of you. And I don't know what they look like in fact if we're finding excessively dense or small lots, we just still have to sell them.
Well, and as we're saying this, I've just thought of a whole new thing. If you allow, and I don't know what the state law is now, if we are now mandated to allow ADUs on all residential lots, are
Yeah.
ADUs allowed in open space developments?
Well, we
We
talked
talked about that,
We don't, I don't think there's an exception,
yeah.
but we looked at the statute and it didn't seem to.
I don't think there is either. And so then I come back to and I do think a factor is compatibility with adjoining neighborhoods. I mean, I'd sort of argue with that law, my interest in making smaller lots has decreased considerably.
I mean, they're still going to need to, I mean, the soils and the septic sizing is gonna be the issue if they're adding an accessory dwelling unit now, instead of having one, you know, septic system designed for a 4-bedroom unit, you know, 4-bedroom house. Now, if you have an additional unit, you need to, you know, upsize your septic system
But
or
how?
have another, but
You
that's-
can't ask how many
that's the
bedrooms
only-
are in houses anymore.
No, but when they have designed their septic system, it's all.
You can't ask how many bedrooms are in it. You can say, I want to design a septic system for a 3-bedroom house. You can say, my house is only 2 bedrooms. That can be the design. I think if you have an approved septic design based under the rules, and as a town, we can't say we can't ask how many bedrooms there are. You get your permit. It's not a bedroom, it's my office.
Yeah, but that only goes, I mean, you're correct, but they still need to be, you know, designing and getting
Septic
the
designers
septic.
still
They,
should state
they
on the
need to be
plan.
stamping the plan, and it's going to state on the plan.
This is designed for
Yeah.
3 bedrooms, a kitchen.
I get that, and you
right.
know who's gonna care about that? No one when
Well-
they buy the house.
Yeah,
Well, that-
The only time somebody's gonna care about it is when they go to sell the house and
Well, when
somebody
the septic
pulls something.
fails, why did it
Well-
fail? Oh, because you added 2 bedrooms on the plan.
yeah.
Right,
You know,
right,
it's-
but, I mean, we can talk about all this approval
Yeah.
all you
I
want,
know.
but we all know
Yeah.
it's, so if you're putting an open space development by a traditional neighborhood, and you're allowing the frontage to be dropped down to
Half.
50, half or smaller, because if
right,
it's
some-
through,
right.
It's, at some point, all of this is kind of arbitrary, though. I mean, you can say number of bedrooms has nothing to do with it. It's the number of people living in the house.
Yeah.
You can have 3 kids in a bedroom.
Yeah.
Well, that's the standard they size it as.
Yeah, but
on
the
bedrooms,
libertarian
not
in me
number of
would say
people.
it's all
I agree,
arbitrary.
I agree,
that's why the state is saying you can't do it anymore.
yeah.
Well, I have, little bit of trouble with the compatibility with the other neighborhoods too, because that's, again, a very subjective thing, people's personal
From a
taste.
landscape architect standpoint, it wouldn't be, it'd be based on size of houses, height of houses, frontage of the road. I mean, I think if you had a landscape architect, they could say,
But
well,
what,
maybe not compatible, maybe consistent with the design of
what,
the.
what
adjoining
appeals to
neighborhoods.
one person, it can be appalling to someone else. I mean, I can go downtown, use an extreme example, go down to Boston and walk down the street with all the brownstones and go, oh my God, why would anybody want to live in this building side by side by side? I'd rather be in the neighborhood behind where there's a little bit of a yard, but in reality, those are the sought after places. I mean, people kill for those brownstones, you know, they love them.
Well, I mean, I used
It's-
to live in one, and you'd have to go pretty
it's-
far out to get away from the brownstones. There's no big yards down there.
But you get the point.
Yeah, I understand that, but I
It's very
think,
subjective.
but you would never be allowed to tear down one of those brownstones and put in a monolith. I mean, it would never happen, because
Yeah.
it would have to be
They would have so many
consistent,
zoning-
it would
so
have
many
to be
restrictions.
designed consistent. St. A's comes in
That's
and
why I don't live
says,
in a city.
St. A's comes in and says, oh, the nursing building is designed consistent. I mean, from a landscape architecture standpoint, there's very clearly some properties that make it consistent.
I think
Even though I
if
think
you,
they cheaped out on it.
if you maintain your buffers, I think the buffers, then you can isolate from the adjoinings.
Yeah,
You're creating this new neighborhood, right, with this
Right.
development. So the buffers that kind of protect everybody
Yeah.
seeing it from the main highway, the original highway. And you've got those buffers to kind of, well,
Yeah.
all there is this new road in there. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool. It hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
Yes, it has, but it hasn't changed the visual
yeah.
aspect of the neighborhood.
I
Now,
agree,
granted,
I agree
We
with
can't
that.
we can't prohibit clear cut, logging before they do that, it's like, wow. And then they come in and say, well, now we want to do an open space development, well, there's nothing left for a buffer, you're gonna have to create a buffer, with some plantings or whatever.
Well, speaking of that, do you allow open space development on lots that the owner has chosen to log
Yes,
or clear cut?
it's a tough one.
Yeah,
know
I
if
don't
wanna go
think,
that way,
yeah,
but-
I don't think that we can prohibit that, because I want people
Why
to,
not?
I mean, but I think that, to your point though, if there's not a sufficient vegetative buffer to provide a screen from the
Right.
abutting neighborhood, then you
Final
plant,
approval's
and
gonna require
that's
that,
in our
right.
current regulation, is,
Oh, nice.
a
Okay.
requirement for, I don't know that it's been enforced, but there is vegetation, the requirement for that vegetative buffer, and what the staggering of the trees should look like if it's being planted. I don't know
Right.
if that's been enforced.
Why isn't a
on it.
restriction on cutting in an open space development when the point of the open space development ordinance is to preserve green space and forest and habitat
No,
a valid
I think-
requirement?
I think that, yes, once they come into us, they can't cut it, and once this is approved, we can restrict and say maybe forestry.
No, no, no,
if
no,
you're-
no, no.
But I
Why,
think that,
if property has been cut within a period, and a logger could give me a time period, if you have cut or clear cut a parcel within so many years of an open space development, you're out.
Or provide buffer. know.
You know what the buffers are? The buffers are a bush this big that they show on the plan is this big.
It dies after 6
And it
months.
yeah,
doesn't-
it dies
right, I
because
know,
they didn't do
right.
irrigation, and it's,
They planted it in November.
And I'll just say on the record
Right,
again,
yeah.
the Irving Station did a landscape plan and they actually did it, and it was good. Because that was a big issue. Because it can be done.
That's- I guess it's
Yeah.
for me, it's more the New Hampshire thought of, you can't do logging before you subdivide, whatever, do the development.
You want to have the advantage of an open space development and not incur the capital expense of developing your lot? Then why would you get the benefit of the logging?
Yeah.
And I don't care how clean a logging operation is, and
I
I've
think
walked a
that's-
lot, they're never clean. They're certainly better than others, but they're never clean.
Yeah, that's, But I do, going back to that neighborhood impact, I think abiding by buffers and requirements of buffers isolates the new development
Yeah.
from the existing.
So are you talking about a buffer around the development or
Yes.
around the lots?
Primarily the development.
But that fragments your open space.
To do a perimeter?
Which if you haven't logged it, isn't a problem.
Problem for managing the open space though.
It is. We had people cutting in the buffers too.
Well, land
Yeah,
trust don't
That's enforcement
wanna
of
take it, 'cause they
that
don't want
is
that
a challenge.
buffer area.
Why not?
They see it as a management problem, there'll be a lot of intrusion all the time from the abutters. Harder to control, harder to police, harder to,
So you mean,
but they're taking on a legal liability in perpetuity to enforce that there's no infringement upon the open space areas.
right,
So if you have something that, you know, you got a big open space like this, they're fine with that, but then here's the houses, now there's a narrow strip up here.
Yeah.
They don't want that. They don't want to touch it. And it happened just recently, right?
And we know the lot owners start to treat that as their lot, their extension
Huh?
of their house.
Yeah.
The lot owners will start treating that as an extension of their lot,
Yeah.
those little strips.
Because they have the same legal obligation to patrol this and maintain it as they do the rest of it, but it's gonna be very difficult because people are just gonna treat it like their own and they just avoid it like the plague. I think their response is a little over the top and exaggerated personally, but that's the position they take.
You're
well,
talking
it's probably harder to maintain markers and that kind of stuff, and so monitoring it gets more difficult.
You're talking about PLC on,
Or any other land trust
Oh,
for that
yeah.
matter. But yeah, that came up with the Acorn Drive, they were interested, but in the end, they were like, well, no, we can't take it because it has those other buffer areas around it.
Those areas where
That was their reason.
where they're basically battling encroachments on both sides from neighborhoods. on-
Yeah.
And so the town takes it on. Oh, that's a good idea.
Because we don't freak out so much over the encroachment in that narrow area, that's why.
Well, because the town will say your problem. Butters go duke it out.
Well,
do
we're-
we need,
because
do we
we-
need that?
We'll keep a
that-
close eye on the important
That
part,
buffer
priorities.
Yeah.
around the development as opposed to buffers on the lots, setbacks on the lots.
I'm less concerned with buffers and setbacks on the lots, honestly. I feel like if we've got, and I'm less concerned about matching the character of the surrounding neighborhoods, but because I had the vision of the buffer around kind of providing some of that insulation. But, and that's how the ordinance currently is written, but, you know, a concern about fragmentation then of the open space and enforcement on the open space and what really is the benefit of the buffer. I don't know though that buffering on the individual lots is, on the individual lots, people are gonna end up cutting down
I
whatever
think it
trees and
becomes
buffers they have anyways.
problematic.
It's even more problematic than if it's,
Especially when
Commonly
the
owned.
smaller sized lots,
yeah,
there's not gonna be a lot left for the buffer and even some of the setbacks.
yeah,
Yeah, well, just trying to.
So I
avoid
think-
this issue.
okay.
I think the mindset of somebody buying into an open space development might be, hey, this is a cluster development, the houses are closer so that we know we further in the backland is some open space.
Yeah, but
It's the
people-
trade-off.
People still make yards.
Yeah.
Right, oh yeah, no,
Then the other thing that I hadn't discussed that, you know, we're talking about the open space. I think there are some other ordinances that have a lot more requirements for trails and stuff in the open space, so we're sort of preserving the open space. I gotta be careful here, I don't wanna make David mad. For everything that's there at the time of development. But we don't really require trails or access or anything like that. We did in some older ones, we had some trails, but I don't recall that in the new
They kind
ones.
of dropped out.
They've dropped out, and should they have?
No, because the regulation requires it and it hasn't been enforced.
But access for whom? People in the
That's-
development, not
that's-
public.
Yeah,
I don't think we can require public access.
Well,
Yeah.
if the town is assuming the burden
No,
of making.
if the town is, I think we can.
yeah.
But for, let's say.
But if
the
they
private
keep it into a
HOA
homeowners
or-
association, yeah, we
Right.
talked about this.
Right, okay.
Right, it's the ownership that determines that requirement, I
Yeah.
think.
All right, so
Yes.
Yeah,
if,
yeah, I think if the
if the
town.
proposed
does it,
owner
then
is the town,
We
that
should require it, because otherwise we're-
recreational trails,
Yeah,
the town's
But I
assuming.
don't
And
think
if-
that's gonna happen very often.
yeah. Well, because, I mean, the town's only gonna take it if the Conservation Commission is able to monitor, and I don't
We're
think.
only
the
gonna take it if
Conservation-
it makes sense to take it.
Yeah,
We're
Right.
not, you know, if, we've done a lot of open space subdivisions in this town. There's only one that is now going to be owned by the town. Only one.
That is not, or is?
Well, it hasn't even been transferred yet, so technically right now there's 0. Acorn Drive will be the first
With town ownership.
with town ownership. There was another one that was proposed, but that development never even went to completion and fell
don't get
apart.
me going on boats and board of selectmen's office.
So, right now there's 0, there will be 1.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Are you talking
okay.
generally comment about,
It's a general comment, I mean, I can point to the class 6 roads is another one.
Uh-oh, I don't think I heard about that.
The mailbox by Green Thumb. Right,
Okay, no, this was a good discussion, and Barbara, it seems like you're,
I'm
you know,
on- I'm on it.
you're
I'm
on
it.
it for
I'm
the
it.
yield plan.
Ted,
What I owe everyone is cleaning up these ridiculously complicated open space standards to simplify, and I'm working on that from our discussion from the last meeting. And I think that and the ADU issue that you raised tonight, that we had talked about that, and I mean, it is what it is.
well,
The-
but we can require bigger lot sizes to, in anticipation.
And I guess maybe, and I don't know that I have the answer, can we put a restriction on an open space development? I
I
don't
don't think
we
so. When I
can.
looked at the statute, the amended
Yeah.
statute last
Yeah.
time, concluded there was no provision for exceptions. And therefore, we should anticipate that there will be
Yeah.
ADUs. So we have to think of how we mitigate the impact, and one way is larger minimum lot sizes.
We had,
and that's probably also gonna be driven by the ability to have septic systems. Because if they're maxed out on the, say, the original house,
I just don't see that, in fact, as that big a deal as it getting septic system approval.
yeah, they could probably
For
come up with a
reasons
different design.
David said,
just
there
have
are
more
all
fill.
sorts of systems out there if you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
Well, that's true.
But I had one other thought regarding that test pit question and soils, and there's a very finite number of soil types in Goffstown. It's not like a big, huge, long list. But there could be a table, since people seem to like tables, where if your soil type in the table is of this type, then, yeah, we might want to see a test pit in that yield plan to see if that makes sense.
that
But
should be
in
a
these
Scott
others,
question then.
in these other soil types, no, because we know. Because some are gonna be more problematic than others.
yep,
And it always comes down in the end, I mean, those soil maps are not exact, you know, they're very generalized, they're like topo maps, right?
Yeah, but we, don't strive for perfection, strive for good enough.
yep.
If
Yeah,
that's
and-
a
and that would get you
administratively
there.
feasible way of doing it, and it's gonna take up most of it. And Scott agrees that we can do it that way.
Okay,
Okay.
I will see what I can work up.
Barbara, you gave up on maybe, I've never seen you give up on something, but,
I made a choice.
okay, on the mandatory versus not. And, we have a consensus, but consensus have been changed. So, as we struggle through this, I don't want to revisit, we plow old fields, but if we're saying we're creating too many issues with the mandatory, that it no longer works, then we can revisit the question. We just didn't see a compelling need to make it non-mandatory.
I don't know enough, and we don't have an engineer on here to say, if you've got a 20, and I'm just picking 20 because that's the minimum, that's the mandatory size, a 20-acre lot, and there are steep slopes on 40% of it, and I can guarantee, I'm sure there is property in Goffstown where that qualifies. The lot is not appropriate for open space because now we're arguing over engineering calculations and yield plans and stuff on steep slopes that are really not feasible. Same thing if a lot is,
Well, I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, you have to take those out first before you determine the yield.
buildable.
So you take the steep slopes and the wetlands out, you're not gonna be looking at engineering
But-
plans
and
on
we
steep
have
slopes.
an exception for lots over X 5 acres, I think, or not more than Y lots out of the parent lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's Y lots per 20 acres, so you have a 60-acre
That's a point.
parent lot, you can have more independent lots. It seems sort of unfair, it's the same standard irrespective of the
Oh,
size
that's a good
of the
idea.
parent lot.
Yeah.
But that would achieve what you're trying to, mostly what you're trying to do. It's a lot that doesn't need open space to preserve open space. David would disagree because he wants contiguous open space with no houses, but so noted.
Here you go again.
I think it's a good goal that we're trying to preserve large contiguous areas, and that is a benefit. I don't want to throw that out.
Okay. I'm just sort of, no, I've lost the argument, having nearly hit deer on exits in New Jersey off the Parkway. I do struggle to why we think it is mandatory that we have I think what might be the most forested state in the nation, that we continue to preserve these parcels because the animals will figure it out. And if there's an endangered species, they're not developing there anyway, so.
I'm not
I
doing,
wish that were true.
I'm not doing this to, I'm not doing this to preserve deer. Don't worry. Jay would like them all shot.
Especially this time of year after gardening season.
Yeah.
I have a rabbit or hare, whatever you call the wild ones, that likes a particular area in my front yard, and I can't figure out which weed it is that it's particularly enjoying, but it's like in the same place all the time when I come home, and sometimes it runs away, sometimes it doesn't.
You need a large dog.
Yeah, I have my hosta planted just
Oh,
to
yeah.
feed the deer.
Country.
apparently.
Oh,
That's the
yeah,
only
they
way.
love the
and-
hostas.
So what else are we gonna do?
I think for tonight, that's probably it,
Yeah,
right?
so I think you have some tasks,
I
I
have
have
some
some
tasks.
tasks, and,
Can we have Patty send out more than one notice, so if it disappears into my
yeah, yep.
inbox, I can find it and not.
I'll ask Patty and I'll also, send separate reminders.
So what is our next meeting?
So we can,
And I feel bad, Betty's missed 2 meetings now. What are
so,
the nights that are
so
her back?
Tuesdays are better for her.
Okay.
And I just need to pick the Tuesday that is not the sewer commission night, so let me double check that calendar. take a moment to comment that our town website is
I hate it.
better, I guess, but not.
Well, they got rid of the picture that showed heading out of Goffstown finally.
Welcome to town, this is how you leave?
It was, they announced it and I sent an email right away. You couldn't find another photo.
They're
So
trying to take the pressure off planning.
it looks like, I think it's the third Tuesday we can't do, I think that's sewer. But that says budget committee, so sewer is not showing up on here, let me try to find it. Sorry.
Let me text him.
Yeah, that's probably faster.
Well, he's not exactly a cell phone guy, so. I don't know why there's not an icon for the town calendar.
That drives me crazy.
Oh,
More time.
I can't find
The
it.
last time I was on, I never found it.
No,
I have
no.
no idea why.
If you type in searching for calendar, it takes you to the library's calendar.
Yeah.
Or Parks and Rec, if you go
Yeah,
further
Parks and
down,
Rec.
Parks and Rec.
And good luck trying to find out in advance when the school and town meeting dates are. You think the school moderator might like to know that, but
It's,
trying to figure it out.
oh, Tim's typing.
Oh, so they just had a meeting last night, was the sewer commission, so we should be good if we wanted to do.
Let me just ask him, when is next meeting?
We could probably do September 23rd or the 30th, pretty safely.
23rd I am here, the 30th I am not.
Conversely, I probably am not here on the 23rd.
And the 23rd is,
I can email stuff out.
the 23rd is
don't.
kind of a quick turnaround for.
Don't build it around my schedule.
Build it around mine.
Barbara's more,
Yeah.
Barbara's doing more work, I'm just
I can
pontificating.
email it out.
Barbara, you said you're not here the 30th.
But the 23rd is sort of a quick turnaround.
It is a quick,
So
but-
if you do it the 30th, and I'll email it out.
Why don't we stick with the 23rd? I'll check
Well,
with
let me make
Patty
sure-
and make sure the room.
I'm waiting for Tim's response, just to want second Tuesday in October, so whatever
Okay.
that. So they're
Yeah,
not meeting
so,
again
so
till
they're
October.
done, so September 23rd, it'll be a quick turnaround, but I think honestly that'll force me to do what I need to get done this weekend and get it to you guys quickly instead of letting it languish. So Barbara, if you think that you can talk to
I'll
Scott
try.
and see what we can get, and I'll verify with Patty, but if we plan on September 23rd, Jim, I'm sure you'll be disappointed to
I'll be
miss
crushed,
us,
crushed.
Say hello to your dog.
I will. But if you send it out, stuff in advance and like,
Yeah, and if you have a
okay.
chance to review, yep, okay. I'll send an email tomorrow to Patty, and then once I confirm with her, we'll, send a reminder to everyone for the meeting date.
I wish I knew how to add things on this computer.
We were just talking about math problems before you arrived. Okay, great. So are we, motion to adjourn?
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Tim?
All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? None? Thank you. We
All right,
are adjourned. Thank
my
you, GTV.
Novocaine has
We
worn
are
off.
adjourned.